Welcome. It's Monday. Here we are again. 5 days we've been back to work now, and we are getting a flurry of activity. If you didn't notice in the 5-Star Connect page, I'm going to talk about a few things, that being one of them. But first, I wanted to review a couple of things that the regulations that we're working under. And there is some confusion about what's going on out there, and I want to try to clear it up to the best of my ability today. There are several sources which are providing us information. One is the governor's office, which actually has the COVID-19 Executive Order 2020-70. That executive order spells out the conditions under which realtors can go back to work. And I want to read just a portion of that to you, specifically under paragraph 10, item number H. It says, effective 12:01 a.m. on May 7, 2020, workers in the real estate industry, including agents, appraisers, brokers, inspectors, surveyors, and registers of deed, provided that any showings, inspections, appraisal, photography or videography, or final walkthroughs must be performed by appointment and must be limited to no more than 4 people on the premises at one time. No in-person open houses are permitted. Number 2, private showings may only be arranged for owner-occupied homes, vacant land, commercial property, and industrial property. So I'm going to cover a few of the questions that we've had in the 5-Star Connect thread already today. As it regards the executive order itself. Vacant land. Diana Eckert posed a question, do the vacant land, the same rules apply? Yes, there's nothing in here that would indicate that even if you're showing a 40-acre parcel and one set of buyers is on one end of it and the other set of buyers is, 35 acres away, it doesn't say that you can have more than 4 people on the parcel at any given time. That is one of the sort of blanket things. And unfortunately, in situations like this, this is new. It's new to the governor. It's new to us. It's new to all of the associations and the Michigan Realtors who are advising us. And sometimes the rules aren't going to make sense, and they're probably going to have to be revised. But until they are revised, these are the ones that we have to operate within. So the answer is yes. Vacant land follows under the same category as a residence at this time. It also addresses the issue of tenant-occupied homes. No, we cannot show tenant-occupied homes, period. There's no discussion. If there's a tenant living in the property, you may not show that property. Now, you may show the owner-occupied portion of the house if there is, for example, a duplex and one side is the owner-occupant and the other side is a tenant-occupant. You may show the owner-occupant side as you would any house, provided you have the seller's permission and you follow their protocol, whatever that might be. If you have a house with let's say an apartment over the garage, for example, you could show the house, the owner-occupied portion, but not the portion over the garage, which might be rented to a tenant. So be very, very careful about that one. It's just a hard no. That's all there is to it. Let's see what else. Seller's requirements. One of the things that is very important that we have to recognize is that a seller has the right to establish safety protocol. And I've seen a questionnaire going around by one of the brokerage companies who has taken it upon themselves to write a questionnaire asking about the buyer's health before permitting showings. Wow, I think that the fact that it is coming from a broker, not from a seller, is very, very dangerous. But and certainly not something that I would recommend that we start doing. It basically puts the listing agent as the one who is setting up the protocol. It also is dangerous from the standpoint of privacy laws. It basically is saying, either you tell me your private medical history or you're not going to be able to show the house. I don't know where that would stand in a court of law. I can assure you that I don't want to find out. I don't want to be the one to pay the attorneys to find out. So I would just be very cautious. But that said, a seller does have the right to require masks and gloves and booties, any of those things, in addition to limiting the number of people that are in the house to no more than 4. Again, another question from Diana. Every seller we have to ask our sellers, what do you want to have happen here? Is it okay if they walk in the house without a mask? Is it okay if they walk in and they don't have masks, gloves, and booties? Do we deny them a showing? That has to be a communication that occurs between the listing agent and the seller, and then communicated clearly before any showings by a buyer's agent. And the buyer's agent has to respect and honor that seller's protocol. We cannot violate that seller's protocol once they have established it. So be very careful. We've gotten into a communication society where we rely on texts and voicemails and emails. And in these kinds of situations, I encourage people to get on the phone and have a conversation with one another. Does your seller have safety protocol? Yes, the listing agent should put it on showing time. They should put it on the multiple listing information, no question. But if that didn't happen, it's always wise, in my view, to just clarify, does the seller have any safety protocols that we need to be aware of?
We have a question.
We have a question.
Julie,
Yay.
Present.
Who should be supplying what? Like booties, masks, booties, sanitizer, etc.? That's a really good question, Julie. And my answer to that would be, it would start with, what does the seller want? Does the seller expect that anyone who walks in the house is going to be wearing masks, gloves, booties, and have hand sanitizer? In my view, that is the responsibility of the buyer. We had a situation where one of the buyers, even though our agent was prepared and had all of the safety equipment, masks, and so on, the buyer chose not to wear it. They wouldn't accept it. And they went in and looked at the house anyway. And then we found out after the fact that it was okay with the seller. The seller was all fine with that. But that's something that we need to be communicating about prior to the actual showing taking place. Certainly, if a seller feels strongly about it and they want to go out and buy the masks and booties and hand sanitizer and so on, I would encourage them to do that. But in my view, I would just say that there's no precedent, there's no indication from either the Michigan Realtors or the executive order who's responsible for buying the stuff. And I would say that in my view, it's a buyer's responsibility. But if anybody disagrees with me on that, please feel free to weigh in. Let's see, what else?
There's another question.
We have another question. Is a pre-approval letter required prior to showing the home? If you require a pre-approval letter, Dan, I would encourage you to get that in writing on the listing contract as one of the conditions of showing the house. We can't simply verbalize that without the seller signing it. Can you require it? Again, each board is going to be a little bit different, so I don't want to answer for all of the boards, but I know that there are some boards who do allow it. I would check with your board, see if that's permitted, but once they say yes it is, make sure it's on the listing contract and signed by the seller before you put it out there. I hope that answers the question. Bev asked a question, inspections. Whose responsibility is it, or do we have to get additional information or signatures for inspections? We have the seller's form and the buyer's form, which indemnify both the listing agent and the selling agent. Do we have to then go back and get that inspection form signed? And my answer to that would be no. That's the inspector's responsibility. The inspector is the one going back in there who has to obtain the seller's permission and to establish and enforce protocol as per the seller request. So if the inspector calls the seller and says, I'm going to come in for a showing tomorrow, or an inspection tomorrow, what do you want us to do? And the seller says, well, I want you to wear masks, gloves, and booties. Okay, well, somebody has to make those arrangements. Somebody has to provide those. And in my view, that's up to the buyer to provide those things for themselves, but it's up to the inspector to enforce those. If the inspector, as a point of service, wants to provide those things to his customers, by all means, I support that. As I would support a buyer's agent stepping in and saying, you know what, I'm going to provide these things to my client as an extra, as a service. So it's a relatively minor question, given that these costs are relatively small. But I would say when it comes to inspection, the inspectors are the ones who are responsible for setting up, getting the permissions, and enforcing protocols. Another question. Let's see what we got.
There's also another one coming in after that.
Don, but now I have a dad coming in who didn't sign before. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what that means. Is dad going to be on the contract? If the answer to that is yes, I would get his signature on an addendum adding him to the purchase agreement before I took him through the property. If dad is simply going to be there as part of the inspections, I see no problem with that. But again, it has to limit 4 inside the home. I don't know. I hope that answered your question. But if he's going to be on the purchase agreement, I would get it in writing, and then and then set up a time for him to go through the property. Jessica. So to be clear, we do not need to fill out those forms asking about the buyer's health. I didn't say that. I said that I think this particular company, this particular broker, is overstepping. They are overreaching their authority and responsibilities to set a policy for all of their sellers that they're going to collect health information. That doesn't mean that they can't deny you a showing. Again, who's going to enforce it? Who's going to tell them that they're overstepping? Eventually, a court might, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get the showing. This is one of those areas that we're going to be seeing battles over the next several weeks. Yeah, they're requesting that you fill out the questionnaire. I guess at this point, your buyer needs to decide whether or not they feel comfortable with that in order to get inside the house. Another one. Kim Anderson. If Dad is going on the inspection but not on the PA, what does Dad need to sign in order to enter the home? I would say he needs to sign the same acknowledgement that the buyer signs, an indemnification of the brokers involved, or if he's going in as part of the inspection being conducted, that the inspector would provide that sort of indemnification for his signature in order to go on the inspections. But I would definitely get something that he would indemnify both brokers. Beverly, what can we do a final walkthrough? The answer is yes. And again, I'm going to go back to Governor Whitmer's executive order, and it says, final walkthroughs must be performed by appointment, and no more than 4 people on the premises at any one time. I encourage all of you, I know that we've posted these things on Facebook Connect in the files section. We've posted the toolkit. This morning, Paul sent out a whole bunch or several links to a document which gives you guidelines for getting back to work, and that's in your emails. All of these things, I encourage you all to take them very seriously, open them and read them so that you understand what we're faced with out here, because they are different interpretations. So, can a buyer refuse to sign health questions based on HIPAA? As I just said, yes, they can refuse, but can the seller then deny them a showing? And I would say that the seller probably could deny them the showing if this is the seller's required protocol. I think it's a very dangerous precedent to set, in my view, but I'm not a judge, and I'm not going to be the one who ultimately decides this question. If a broker is setting themselves up as the screener, the health screener for buyers, and is applying this to all of their listings, I think it's a very dangerous practice. I would not want to see us go down that road, because I think that we open ourselves up to many lawsuits. Nevertheless, at this moment, we don't have any indication that we can stop them based on the current laws and the current interpretations as we see them. So again, if you want to read more about the executive order, it's really simple. You can simply Google Michigan Executive Order 2020-70, COVID-19 Michigan Executive Order 2020-70, and look under item H, paragraph 10, and that will give you the information as it regards realtors. So I want to switch over here and talk a little bit about the toolkit that the Michigan Realtors has provided. And this is where it gets a little bit confusing. I've seen that some people are saying, well, you can't go in if there's no masks. You can't go in if there's no gloves or booties being worn. That's not true. What the requirements of the executive order, again, all in-person meetings with sellers, and showings must be done by appointment. No more than 4 people. No in-person open houses. All people must maintain a 6-foot social distance at all times. And landlords, property managers may not arrange in-person showings of a rental unit until after the current tenant has vacated. In other words, moved out, not just gone for a walk for a couple of hours. The tenant has to have moved out and vacated the premises before you can set up a showing for that property. In addition, the Michigan Realtors has provided some measures to consider. I want you to hear that language, measures to consider. Considering limiting the in-person showings to potential buyers who have been pre-approved. Dan Baglean's question. To use photographs, virtual showings to narrow down their housing needs and wants prior to any in-person showings. Good idea. Instead of showing them 10 houses as we would have at one point, let's see if we can use virtual tours to minimize the exposure that we have out there. We realtors are encouraged to work together to avoid consecutive multiple showings in order to cause overlapping appointments. Wow, this is a big one. And I think you've seen all of the Facebook blowing up with all sorts of violations of this, where somebody showed up for their appointment, there were still people in the house, or they were showing the house and other people walked in. We have to be respectful of one another. We have to be respectful of the law and the reason for the law. We want to keep people safe and still be able to do our job. And the more we violate, the more violations that are recorded, the greater likelihood we have of having our rights yanked away again. So let's not do that. Let's be respectful of the space and abide by the rules. Consider providing marketing materials and information relevant electronically in advance of the showing. Encourage sellers to not be present. We've always wanted them to not be present anyway, so this is a good excuse to say, hey, would you get out of the house because we don't want to have interaction due to COVID-19. It says, ask sellers to turn on all the lights and leave exterior doors, drapes, and blinds open to ensure that anyone entering the home will not need to touch light switches and doorknobs. It's a great safety measure, but when it comes to vacant houses, it's just not realistic. Let's be honest. Ask sellers to clean and disinfect all frequently touched surfaces prior to and after showing. Well, if I'm going to be out of the house, if I'm a seller and I'm going to be out of the house for 6 hours while I have multiple showings throughout that period of time, I go off to do something on a walking trail or whatever. That's just not realistic. We have to apply some common sense to these recommendations. Agents conducting a showing are encouraged to meet their clients at the home rather than drive them. Okay, that's probably not a bad plan. If you're the agent and you're worried about your own health, that's what I would do. Discourage anyone who does not need to view the home from attending the showing. It's a great way to get rid of the parents. I'll just say that. Encourage the use of masks and gloves while viewing a home. Encourage the use of masks and gloves. Doesn't mean that they have to, unless the seller has required that as their safety protocol. Ask buyers to refrain from touching surfaces, light switches, and so on. Don't share pens, phones, tablets, and so on. Minimize the time physically present in the home. After showing, rather than engaging in a discussion while still at the property, discuss the home via email or by phone. Those are options. So I think that there are a lot of things that are recommendations which are being perceived as requirements, and they're not. So again, please read all of these documents that's coming. I know it's a lot coming at us all, but it's really important. Paul's material that he sent out by email is really important. There's one document at the top which you can use to promote getting back to work to your clients, past customers, friends, family, Facebook. It's a great piece to notify people that you're back to work and that you're going to do it safely. So, and then the other two forms, the seller's form and the buyer's form, very important documents. And then, I wanted to go back to Paul's post. He also has the seller documents in Dropbox, which he shared with you this morning, and also the buyer document, certification and release. Has both of those for you in Dropbox, and that was an email that he sent out at 8:05 a.m. Wednesday, May 6th. So if you can't find it, he may have already sent it out. No, he maybe sent it to me. But at 8:05 on May 6th, Wednesday, he sent this out to all of you along with a video. And I believe that video is also posted on Facebook Connect. So Paul sent out a lot of really good stuff. And the COVID-19 actual executive order and the Michigan Realtor Toolkit are all available if you Google them online. We've also put them on Facebook Connect for you. And again, we encourage you to read them and understand them before you set up showings or as you take listings to make sure that you are in compliance and that your seller's requests are honored and acknowledged and respected. So, any other questions do we have here?
There's one or two.
Okay, let's see. Jessica, are the COVID in our .loop docs required or suggested? I believe the ones, Paul and I had a discussion last week, and the only ones we left in there were, I believe, the buyer's acknowledgement and the seller's acknowledgement. If you give me just a second, I can tell you pretty quickly. There were a bunch of them in there for indemnifications and inspections, and we felt that was no longer 5 Star's responsibility to do those things. So we took them out. Paul archived them, and the only ones that are in there now there's one from GCAR. That appears to be, the one from GCAR appears to be a addendum essentially extending the showing or the process of closing a deal due to GCAR. The reopening real estate post-COVID is the document I talked about that you can use to post on Facebook or share by email with your friends and family. And then there's a COVID, down at the bottom, there's a COVID-19 showing certification and release. That's the one for the buyer. And the one for the seller is right above it. So yes, those are the four. The bottom three are the forms that we recommend you use. The GCAR form up at the top is one essentially to extend the closing as a result of any COVID-related reasons. Now, let me see if I can get out of here and go back to our questions. Pep, I've created a folder to hold all my signed COVID-19 showing certificates and release forms that all the buyers I have showed homes have signed. How long should we keep these forms? a year? I would say forever. It's easy that you can load these up into the buyer's file on dotloop. I know that when I go out to show homes to a buyer, I set them up on dotloop because I've got a buyer's agency contract, I may have an affiliated business relationship, and so on. And I would include the COVID-19 showing certificates and release forms within there. And then you don't have to worry about saving them. They're saved automatically. I hope that helps. And we are at 1:30. Again, look at everything that we've sent to you. It's important that you are aware of what is in the Executive Order 2020-70, and it is also important that you are aware that what the Michigan Realtors recommends, but is not necessarily a requirement unless the seller specifies it. Again, about HIPAA, and I think that brokers who do that are creating a very dangerous precedent for themselves, but that's their choice. And as the law stands right now, we don't have any power to change it and say, no, you can't do that. That may come, but we don't have it right now. So I hope that helps. Let's get back to work. Let's get some listings, because listings are selling. As you see in Krista Buchema's post, thank you, Krista. How's everybody doing? Wow, listings are getting a lot of attention. So get out there, get listings, get buyers, and do it safely, and get back to work. And we'll see you here next week.